Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for another card video. Today's card uses the Garden in Bloom set by Stampin' Up. I'm using this 3-part butterfly right here. And my sentiment is from the Simon Says Stamp set called Stripe Greetings. I love the sentiments in this set. I'm going to start by stamping my sentiment because everything is going to go around it. I'm stamping it with Versamark ink on some crumb cake cardstock by Stampin' Up with some white embossing powder. And then I'm going to draw the border around it. I'm using a Pacific Point marker by Stampin' Up. The only color on this card is Pacific Point. I'm using both the marker and I'll use the ink pad later. And I'm just going to draw this line kind of close to the sentiment and make it a little curvy, not too curvy, so I'm just free-handing it. And I'm kind of taking from the Zentangle I've been doing by doing this freehand drawing around. It's just going to add a little bit of interest to the edges of the butterfly. So I'm going to draw both of these down the side. I'm going to speed this up a little bit. My second line is about 1/4 of an inch outside that first line. Now I'm going to add a little bit of detail to these, and I'm adding the same detail that I did in the Zentangle card from last week. And I'm just drawing a rope kind of, and so I'm just drawing little lines all the way down, and I'm curving my lines so it looks like this rope is rounded, and I'm going to do that on both sides. The next step is to stamp my butterflies. I've got Pacific Point ink pad now, and this is the outline stamp of the butterflies. So I'm going to grab a Post-it and I'm just going to use this to mask. Rather than trying to cut a piece that looks like the rope I just drew, I just used a small Post-it and I'm just going to cover up the areas as I need to. So I'm going to randomly stamp these butterflies, and I'm keeping away from my sentiment enough to not make it look too crowded. So I'm going to speed this up a little bit. I'm covering, so making it look like some of the butterflies are kind of inside the rope, or behind the rope I should say. And I will be cutting this out in a little bit. So I've got some hanging off the edge here. Now the second part I decided to stamp in white. So I'm using Stampin' Up Whisper White pigment ink. And the reason why I chose this brand is because I did that ink comparison. I want to say that white ink comparison was about a year ago, something like that. Anyway, so I compared all these different white inks and Stampin' Up came on top, which I was actually really surprised about. But anyway, I'm going to go through the same exact process, and I'm just going to eyeball these because they don't have to be perfect. They're kind of sketchy looking, and I'm going to stamp the white on top of the Pacific Point that I've already done on the outline. And then finally, I'm going back to Pacific Point for the third step of this butterfly. And it's just kind of a little tiny butterfly that I'm going to put on top of the white right on the inside. It just adds a little bit more blue to this butterfly. So I have the really dark blue that's absorbed into the crumb cake with my outline. And then I have kind of a light blue that's in the center now. And I'm wiping off my stamp each time to make sure I don't transfer any of that white ink onto my ink pad. I decided to add one more step to my butterfly. I'm going back to my Pacific Point marker, and I'm just highlighting the butterfly body, and I'm just drawing a line up each of the wings. And I know it seems like there's a lot of steps here, but they go by really quickly, so it's a pretty easy card to make. I think this step sort of adds a little bit of balance with the outline of the butterfly. I'm going to add some paint splatters next. I find that using my Gonzai Tombow watercolors for the splatters works the best because these watercolors are more opaque than other watercolors, and so when I splatter it, it really makes a solid splatter rather than a faded one. So I'm going to tap it, and I realized I forgot to wipe off the water from my brush when I dipped it in the water, and that really helps to not get those stray watermarks that you get when it starts dripping off your brush. So I'm going to lightly tap this and get some nice white splatters. I'm going to tie in the white from my butterflies with the rope here by coloring in these little areas with a white gel pen. This white gel pen has a pretty broad tip, but I made these lines wide enough to fit just about one brush stroke across. After using this pen for so many years, I have found that you get the best results when you use a light hand. If you press too hard with this pen, then you tend to get a blank line inside two lines, if you know what I mean. So just kind of very lightly touch the paper and you get much better results. So I'm going to cut the edges around here. I'm just going to be careful. I'm using a large scissor so I get more of a clean cut. And if you cut off some of the Pacific Point by accident, you can just recolor the edge in with your marker. Now I'm going to put this panel on a piece of Neenah Solar White, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch folded. And I'm just going to center it right there in the middle. trying to be a little careful here because I think it's still a little wet, so I just don't want to touch any of the white areas. And that is the card for today. A lot of detail, but I think it was worth it. I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.